Options are a contract that stipulates the strike price and the expiration date. So remember those three things: contract, strike price, expiration date. That's when you buy an option, you enter that contract. What's a strike price? A strike price is your goal. It's your price target that the stock price has to reach by the expiration date. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I buy January 2023 call options on CleanSpark. That means that my contract expires after January. Now, let's say the current price is 15, strike price is 20. What I'm saying at the moment here is my price target for CleanSpark is that it needs to go above $20 by January 2023. If it doesn't go above $20, if it doesn't go above the strike, by the expiration date, your option is worth $0 and you lose 100% of your money, which is pretty shitty. So when picking your strike price, the lower you go, the less risky it is, because the higher the chance there is of your stock reaching that strike price. So let's say with CleanSpark, there's a higher odds of it going to $20 than it is of going to $100, let's say. Then we're talking about expiration date. The further the expiration, the safer it is. Why? Because it gives you more time for the stock price to reach or to surpass the strike price. But also something to keep in mind, it's going to cost you a bit more to buy you an option that has, one, a lower strike price, which is safer, more attainable, and also more time. The more time you buy, the more it costs you. The more, in other words, premium you have to pay. I'll get into that later if you don't know what premium is. And a quick word on expiration dates, don't mess with it. If you are aiming for CleanSpark stock to hit a certain price, take the option for another 3 months later. You want to give yourself a bit of time, a bit of leeway for things and events that are unpredictable, because these things happen all the time. Let's talk a bit about what's the payout. You know, how much money can you make with options? Because there's a few things that we need to distinguish here. We have premium, we have intrinsic value. So let's break it down. With options, you can buy and sell them at any time. It's just like a stock, but only until expiration. When you pass expiration, the contract is closed and a transaction takes place. A lot of things happen at expiration, and I gotta say, it's really complicated. The option gets exercised. You are forced to buy shares if you're in the money, but I'm not going to go more into that. All I'm going to say is, personally, I never hold my options until expiration, meaning, let's say it's January 2023. I will never hold until January 2023. It's just too complicated. You're going to need to have a lot of money in your bank account in order to execute the option, because it's always for blocks of 100 shares. Let's say my strike price is 50 and we finish at 60 or whatever. It means that I'm going to have to dish out $5,000 at the moment of expiration. That's a hefty amount for anybody to have in their account just lying in cash. For most people, in any case, I'm only 22, so most of the money I have is pretty much invested. As I mentioned previously, one call option is essentially representing 100 shares. And what the call option is, at expiration, it represents, I'm going to say this slowly, the right to buy 100 shares of the stock at the strike price. Let's say the stock surpassed the strike price. Let's say my strike is 50 and the stock is currently at 60. That means that there's a $10 profit per share. Remember, there's 100 shares. So $10 times 100, that's $1,000 profit that you are making on this option. That, what I just explained to you, this concept, is what we call intrinsic value. That's the undeniable value of what your option is if it's $10 above the strike price. I'll give you an example with Micron, because I've been trading Micron stock options pretty much all summer and I made a killing on them so far. I'll put a photo about it on the screen. So let's take an example with Micron. MU, for instance. Let's say Micron ends at $95 by January 2023. I bought Micron January 2023 calls, strike 90, meaning my objective is for Micron stock price to surpass $90 by January 2023. Now let's say by the date of the expiration, the stock price surpassed, yay, I'm happy, but it only surpassed all the way to $95. That means that there's a $5 difference between where the current stock price is and where the strike price is. That, in essence, is money in the bank. However, to buy this call option, it cost me personally, and this is an actual trade that I did, it cost me $6.50. And as you may recall, we're always talking about 100 shares at a time. Let's just talk about one call. I bought one call for $6.50. That means I spent $650 per contract for one option. Out of pocket, $650. And as I mentioned previously, since we have a $5 spread between 95 and 90. That's money in the bank. However, I spent 650, so you have a negative difference in this case. Unfortunately, if that was to happen, that would result in a loss of $150. And by the way, we're only talking about intrinsic value at the moment. I'll talk about premium in a second after all of this. So to sum it up, the strike is 90. How much I paid for the option is 650. That means that the break even is 90 plus 650. Why? Because you profit from the difference between where the strike price is and where the stock price is. So I want the stock price to surpass not 90. 90 is just the base to make $0. 96.5, however, is the break even price on an intrinsic value basis. So at $96.5, I break even. If you add an extra $650 to the stock price to 96.5, that means that you are two $650s above $90. The first $650 represents the revenue that covers how much you paid. So you're essentially breaking even. The second $650, however, that is pure profit. And if you understand what I just said, you understand the power of options, how explosive options can be. Following my logic, if you're following me here, at $90 plus 650 plus 650 plus 650, so three 650s above 90, that means you are tripling your money. That means you have two 650s above your break even, so on and so on. So every bound upwards by 650, you are essentially doubling, tripling, quadrupling your money. I hope that makes sense. And by the way, if it doesn't make sense, if you have any questions, shoot me a message. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, this is insane. I can make so much money with options. Well, here's the catch. If options by the time of expiration are below the strike price, meaning with Micron below 90, let's say it's at 89, you almost reach it, well, the value of your contract is zero. Options can be very unforgiving. Be very, very careful. And my best advice is whatever you choose more conservative. Choose the lower strike price. Choose the further expiration. Like, don't mess with options. And it trades just like a stock. You can buy it, sell anytime. You can day trade it even. And so if you do that, if you day trade it, why don't you just pick the further expiration and just sell it when you want to sell it? Like, let's say your objective is 6 months. Pick the 1.5 years. Who cares? Because you're still getting a heck of a lot more leverage than if you were just buying the stocks themselves. By what I mean with that is that the multiplicative power of options is so much more elevated. Even if you take the furthest expiration that is possibly there, you are going to be doing yourself a favor by not taking too much risk. The risk is that it goes to zero, and let me tell you, it has happened to me in the past. And losing 100% of your money really sucks. And I really hope it does not happen to you. So let's do a quick example just so you can have a better idea of what I'm talking about this multiplicative power. If you didn't really understand what I was saying previously, here's a quick summary. Let's do an example. So let's say my strike is 60 on CleanSpark. That means that I need CleanSpark to go over $60 by a certain date. The date I chose is January 2023. So by Jan 2023, I need CleanSpark to go above 60. I bought this contract for $1 per contract. What does this mean? This means that I will break even at 61, double my money at 62, triple 63, quadruple 64, so on and so on and so on. Let's say CleanSpark goes to $100. That means, ladies and gentlemen, that I will 40x on my money. This 40x represents essentially $100 where the stock price is now currently versus the strike price at $60. The difference is 40. And seeing as I bought the contract, my call options at $1 per contract, that means that there is $41 between 60 and 100. I know that sounds a bit confusing, but that's essentially how options work. And I'm trying to explain it in the most digestible way possible, but I understand that it's really complicated. And so if you still have some questions, just shoot them in the description below. What I've explained so far, everything that I've talked about so far was only talking about intrinsic value. What's intrinsic value? That is essentially the true value of your call option. All right, so as I said, let's take, for instance, the strike 60 on CleanSpark for $1. 61 is my break even. However, I'm buying this $1 strike 60 contract today when CleanSpark is worth $13, $14. Well, you'd expect that when CleanSpark increases in stock price, let's say it's at $30, well, I would assume that my call option is also going to increase in price. And what that increase represents is premium. And why is it premium? Because here's the thing. If we're anything below 60, intrinsic value is zero. That's the intrinsic value of the call option on expiration. However, if let's say CleanSpark doubles and goes to $30 tomorrow, well, all of a sudden, if you're buying strike 60s on CleanSpark, it's a lot less risky. And as you may recall, what I've been talking about previously, less risk equals you need to pay more. You need to pay more to ensure that that money is safe when you're buying it. So I'd assume that if CleanSpark doubles, the value of my call options are probably going to triple, maybe even more. But that is only talking about premium. So if we take everything into account, let's say CleanSpark goes to $61, let's say, my call options are not going to be worth $1 per contract anymore. The intrinsic value is going to be $1. But the premium, which represents how much people are willing to pay for this $1 option, is going to be much, much more elevated. At $61, I'd have to say it would be at least over $15 per call option, meaning that if you were to buy a strike 60 while the stock was at 61, your break even would probably be at above $70 if you bought it in that specific instant. So it's kind of like a sliding scale, and it's a bit hard to wrap your head around, and I understand that is complex, but hopefully this video helped demystify a big portion of what options are. All you need to keep in mind is what I mentioned previously about intrinsic value, is that for every $1 above 60, I'm doubling, tripling, quadrupling my money. That's all you need to remember. But what I'm saying about all of this stuff about premium is essentially trying to say that, look, you'll be doubling, tripling, quadrupling. In reality, it's probably going to be a bit more than that because you're going to be adding premium on top of it. So that pretty much wraps up the video. I hope you enjoyed it and that it brought you some value. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video was useful to you, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Peace.